This old winter air rule quietly shaped how generations heated their homes, and it still works today. If you study old buildings long enough, especially farmhouses, early industrial homes, and pre-war urban residences, one pattern keeps appearing. These homes were not sealed tight the way modern houses are. They were designed to breathe in winter, deliberately and in controlled ways. Builders understood that winter air, when managed correctly, was not the enemy. It was a tool. That understanding lowered fuel use, reduced rot, and kept interiors healthier long before thermostats and insulation foam existed. What follows is the practical rule behind that thinking, how it worked historically, and how you can apply it right now without gutting your house or buying expensive upgrades. The winter air rule was about controlled exchange, not sealing everything shut. Older builders worked with a simple principle. Warm air must move upward and outward while cold air must enter low and slow. They designed homes so stale, moisture-heavy air escaped through upper leaks and vents while fresh winter air entered near the floor, warmed gradually, and fed the living space. This constant but gentle exchange prevented condensation, stabilized indoor temperatures, and reduced the amount of fuel needed to reheat damp, stagnant air. The mistake modern homes make is blocking all movement, trapping moisture, and forcing heating systems to fight cold surfaces rather than air. Older homes used vertical airflow instead of mechanical circulation. In many 19th and early 20th century homes, you will find high transom windows, attic vents, loose roof lines, and unsealed upper walls. These were not flaws. They allowed warm air to exit naturally. At the same time, cold air entered through floor-level gaps, cellar windows, and baseboard cracks. Because cold air is dense, it stayed low at first, warming slowly as it rose. This reduced drafts while still refreshing the air. The heating system, often a stove or radiator, worked with this flow instead of against it. Less fuel was needed because the incoming air was dry and easy to warm. Dry winter air heats faster and costs less to maintain. Well, one fact that older builders just seem to know by heart is that dry air is cheaper to heat than humid air. You see, winter air, especially in those cold regions, has very little moisture in it, and when that dry air replaces the damp air inside, it really lowers the overall humidity in your home. Dry air, it just takes less energy to warm up. That's actually why an older home with only modest heat sources could still feel pretty comfortable, even when the fire was burning low. These days, modern sealed homes tend to trap moisture from things like cooking, bathing, and even just breathing. That ends up making your heaters work harder and run longer than you might expect. The placement of heat sources followed this rule precisely. Wood stoves, coal stoves, and early radiators were rarely placed at the highest point of a room. They were usually installed low, near the center of the home or along interior walls. This placement allowed rising heat to pull fresh air inward from lower entry points. The heat did not blast the room. It encouraged steady circulation. The result was fewer cold pockets, less condensation on walls, and a more even temperature throughout the structure. Heating bills stayed lower because heat was not wasted fighting trapped cold zones. Now you might be wondering how you can actually use this rule today and, do it without having to tear your whole house apart. The big mistake folks make these days is sealing up everything real tight and then relying only on mechanical heating. But hey, you can turn this around without having to rip out any insulation. Just start by letting in some controlled airflow at low levels. Maybe it's a slightly cracked basement window, a floor-level vent, or even a small, purposely unsealed air path near the base of your house to bring in that dry winter air. At the same time, you'll want to let warm air escape slowly from higher up. like through attic vents or maybe an upper window opened just enough to get that air moving. The goal is not a breeze, but a gentle exchange you can barely feel. Managing moisture is as important as managing temperature. Older homes stayed warmer because they stayed drier. Moisture steals heat. When walls, furniture, and floors absorb humidity, they act like cold sponges. Allowing dry winter air to circulate removes that moisture naturally. You'll notice, fewer cold walls, less frost on your windows, and just a more stable indoor temperature overall. This really cuts down on how often your heater has to kick on, which, directly lowers how much fuel you end up using. This principle, it applies no matter if you're heating with wood, gas, oil, or even electricity. Small adjustments, believe it or not, can give you measurable savings over weeks, not just months. But applying this rule ain't going to give you instant results overnight. Older builders, they always expected a gradual balance. After a few weeks of keeping that winter airflow controlled, you'll see indoor humidity drop, materials start to dry out, and your home will hold heat a whole lot better. Heating systems run shorter cycles, and, rooms feel warmer even at lower thermostat settings. This is how homes built a century ago stayed livable through those long winters with limited fuel supplies. They worked with physics rather than trying to overpower it. This rule also protected structures from long-term damage. Condensation inside walls was a known enemy even before mold was named. Builders allowed winter air to flush moisture out before it could settle into wood and plaster. This is why many old homes, despite poor insulation by modern standards, still stand solid today. By reintroducing controlled airflow, you are not only lowering heating costs, but also extending the life of your building. This is a lesson survivalists and preservationists both understand well. So, why do modern heating systems struggle where old methods seem to succeed? Modern heating systems, they assume sealed environments. When moisture starts to build up, these systems just respond by burning more fuel instead of actually addressing the cause. And honestly, this just leads to higher bills and, uneven comfort throughout the home. Old builders always tackled moisture problems first, and then heat would kind of take care of itself. If we use that same way of thinking nowadays, it takes the load off your heater and puts it on managing airflow instead, which honestly costs almost nothing. The winter air rule, it still holds true even if you're in an apartment or a smaller space. Even if you don't have access to attics or basements, you can still use this principle. Just by bringing in fresh air near the floor and letting stale air out higher up, you can create good circulation in pretty much any enclosed space. A slightly opened lower window paired with an upper vent, or, just a cracked window, can really help reduce humidity and stabilize temperatures. The key is moderation and consistency, not wide open exposure. This knowledge was passed quietly, not written loudly. You will not find this rule explained clearly in most modern manuals. It survived through practice, observation, and necessity. Families who depended on limited fuel learned quickly what worked and what failed. This was not theory, it was survival. The fact that it still works today is not nostalgia. It is physics unchanged by time. If this kind of forgotten knowledge matters to you, if you value what builders, homesteaders, and survivors understood before modern systems replaced skill with consumption, then you are in the right place. Subscribe to Warfield Prepper Chronicles for more documented practical history that still applies today. Share this guide with others who care about preserving what actually works, and keep these lessons alive for the next winter and the next generation.